Okay, thank you all for coming, and thanks to the panelists for being here. And I know Vanya will join us soon, Vanya Galicia, our third panelist. I'm going to introduce the panelists, and then after I do that, I've got some questions that we've prepared for them. And then after that, hopefully there will be time for questions from you all. And here is Vanya. All right. Hi, Vanya.
Hey.
Hey, we're just about to get started. I was just telling folks that I'm going to introduce you all, and then there will be some questions I'm going to ask you, and I provided you all with those questions. And then after that, hopefully we'll have some time for questions from the whole group. Okay, so first, I'm just going to go alphabetically for all these things. So the first would be Nadia. Nadia Balasone. Graduated from Eastern in 2018 as a double major in English with a concentration in rhetoric and composition, and business administration with a concentration in marketing. In her senior year, she worked at the energy office on campus, helping to write, pilot, and launch the statewide certification program, Sustainable Connecticut. After graduation, she helped to implement the program with the Capital Region Council of Governments. Nadia served 3 years as an HR technician in recruitment for the town hall in Manchester, Connecticut. Most recently, she was hired by the town of Hamden as human resources officer, helping to protect employee rights under Title VII. Nadia is graduating with her MA in English from Trinity College this spring. Her thesis is written on her part-time work as a professional writing tutor and educational assistant at Manchester Community College. Welcome, Nadia. Haley Blackwood Larkin graduated from Eastern in 2021 with a bachelor's in English and a minor in psychology. After graduating, she was a manuscript prep intern at a life coaching company for 7 months while searching for full-time work. Then in early 2022, she transitioned into the workforce by way of 2 separate roles. She began a career in the pharmaceutical advertising industry as a junior editor at Biolumina, while simultaneously taking charge as lead editor at a nonprofit organization called the Prosperity Project. As a junior editor, Kaylee collaborates with and supports her colleagues across multiple departments by proofreading and reviewing various oncology marketing materials prior to several medical reviews and final publication, meticulously ensuring those materials align with FDA regulations, the American Medical Association guidelines, as well as specific client demands. In addition, at the Prosperity Project, Kaylee has since been promoted to Director of Editorial Strategy and Content Development, where her main responsibilities involve cultivating and managing a team of content writers, proofreading and editing all organizational materials, and maintaining the organization's blog. Welcome, Kaylee. And Vanya Galicia received her BA in English from Eastern in 2020. Shortly after graduating, she began her career as community farmer at Grow Windham, a local nonprofit dedicated to centering youth voices in the food sovereignty movement. Since then, Vanya has continued to apply her skills as a communicator to make food justice resources and knowledge more accessible to her community. Combining both her knowledge and skills in agriculture and writing, she has facilitated the growth of food projects of food access resources in Willimantic and has worked on multiple community campaigns and projects to further food equity. In addition to her role as community farmer, Vanya has also continued her advocacy work in immigrants' rights. She's currently on the board of the Neighbor Fund, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting immigrant communities in Windham and Talon counties, providing direct financial support to those facing financial hardships due to their status. Vanya plans on continuing to stay local and contribute to creating intersectional solutions to local social issues. She believes that collective mutual solutions are crucial to her community's joy and liberation. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you all for coming and being here and answering questions for us. So again, what I'm going to do is just start with some questions and go around the room. I'll go around to you all alphabetically, and we'll see what you have to tell us. So my first question is, with the exception of Kaylee, you've wound up in careers that most people wouldn't immediately envision for English majors. So to start us off, I'd like for you to briefly describe your path since graduation from Eastern. And what were the steps that took you from graduation to where you are now, and the key moments that if you can think of them, that kind of wound up directing you toward where you are now? Nadia, could you start us off?
Sure. Thank you so much. So I initially wanted to graduate Eastern and go straight into law school. And I think the idea that prompted that was working at the energy office, and I wanted to kind of get more exposure into the environmental sector. And I had this English degree, I was good at writing. So I kind of thought that was my way in to do environmental law. I did one semester at Quinnipiac and really felt limited actually in that degree path. So I was pulling from some of the experience I had in municipal government, and I actually got recruited to work in recruitment for the town of Manchester, where my writing skills kind of really came into play, especially with my municipal background and knowledge. So I think I got a lot more leeway to do a lot more writing, and that's actually built on itself now into my current job as an HR officer, where I have to write policy a lot of the time or study policy and kind of respond and create those materials from scratch. So I think kind of being in the launch of things, especially during my senior year at Eastern, really helped to prepare me to keep writing original material for usually municipal governments. So.
Great, thank you. Kaylee, what about you?
Yeah, thank you. So in my senior year, I spent a lot of time on my LinkedIn profile and my resume. I felt like I needed to really beef it up to get ready to apply for positions after graduation. And um, after I graduated, I decided to apply to both unpaid and paid positions because I didn't feel like I had enough editorial experience under my belt. And I noticed pretty quickly that you need a lot of editorial experience, which is what I wanted to do um, for an entry-level job. So I decided to kind of bite the bullet. And if I got something unpaid, I'd take it, even though I was looking for paid positions. So that's what happened with my internship for 7 months. So that was unpaid. And I spent a lot of time doing creative editing and working mostly with fiction. So that was really nice because I was a creative writing concentration during my English major, and I got to use a lot of that creativity during that internship. And after that, I was able to find my positions. And that experience really helped because they asked about that during the interview, and they asked about all my positions during my English major as well as a writing tutor and as a writing and editing intern. So I was able to pull from all of that and impress them for my junior editor position, which I've been in for a year now. So that's been nice. So I think focusing on my resume and my professional portfolio really helped. And I think that was really important for me.
Great, thank you, Kaylee. Vanya, what about you?
So when I graduated, it was 2020. So it was a year where COVID was like, kind of throwing everyone into hellfire, and it was like super hard for employment. But one of the biggest things that helped me was just being really involved in my community prior to graduating. I had a lot of connections and a lot of people that were kind of waiting an open arm for me to pretty much, work with them. So that's one big thing that I advocate a lot, like even in your undergrad, to just keep connecting. If there's a certain community or a certain space that you really like try to really make some connections in those spaces, because people will remember your name, and then they will like bring it up when there's a position open or something like that. So that's kind of happened with what happened with my position. I had worked with this organization, Grow Wyndham, since I was a young teen. And when I graduated, it happened to be that they had a position open for community farmer. I, like Nadia, was thinking about going to law school initially during that time, but it just felt too hard, and it didn't really align with what I thought I wanted to contribute to my community. And especially in that time where there was just so much mutual aid and so much grassroots work doing like the really hard work to support community, that's just what it felt like was logical for me to go into. And that's what I ended up doing. So I've been a community farmer at Grow Wyndham now for almost 3 years. But Grow Wyndham is pretty small and we're expanding now. So it's really cool to be in a space where I was a young youth and now being kind of more of a older educator and seeing that process. But I've learned a lot of skills that my degree kind of taught me, especially with grant writing and just community like engagement and communications. Storytelling is really powerful in community spaces. And that's one big thing that I think really made the transition easier into this position, to be able to make connections with community members.
Great, thank you. So now that we've gotten a sense of your path to your current work, can you tell us a little bit more about your job? Like, what do you do on a typical day? What are your primary, I mean, you've kind of talked about your primary responsibilities, but what is a typical day like for you? Nadia.
Something that I didn't expect with the job that I just got hired into is that I'm handling grievances and complaints, which is, I'm quite literally the complaint department, and that's something really new to me. So that's actually really tested my writing skills as of late, is to write a piece that summarizes everyone's point of view in the most equitable way and provides a solution. So that's really been like thought-provoking for me to try to work through how to mediate folks in workplace disputes. But other than that, I assist in like posting and recruiting, and also like designing material, using some of like digital design software like Canva, or doing like the website CMS, just to kind of present us in one uniform way as one uniform office for messaging.
Great, thanks. Kaylee, what about you?
So for me, day to day, as a junior editor, I mostly edit marketing materials for oncology brands, which are pharmaceutical cancer drugs. So that's brochures, PowerPoints, you know, those commercials that you see that for drugs, and they list all the like side effects. Like, I'm reading all of that, I'm editing all of that text and those voiceovers. So that's what I do all day.
Haley, I just want to piggyback on your answer for a second. Did you have to do additional training to do the medical editing and writing?
So no, at my company, they have like a lot of optional training opportunities to learn more about oncology and about medical editing if you want. But there's a really good training process where you slowly learn about the different types of edits that you do, and what this word might mean, the scientific word or this medical word that you might see often. So you kind of pick it up as you go along, but you don't need to have like a basis, at least at my company, for the entry level position. So that's been nice. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Vanya, what about you? What's your typical day like?
So my day varies a lot. I wear many different hats. I'm a youth educator, community organizer, literal farmer, and like just a big mesh of different things pretty much. In the winter and fall, I pretty much just sit at a desk most of the day, planning curriculum like around food justice work for young teens and adults, and then writing grants, trying to get funding for our organization, things like that, working on community outreach materials and or like educational things and collaborations. So for example, this past winter, we've been working on this Eastern Connecticut side initiative around food system and food access projects, where we're trying to pretty much connect all local farmers and producers to also low income consumers, and find like 3 sweet spots on the Eastern Connecticut region to come up with like 3 new initiatives to support food access. But then on the other end, once the spring comes, so like right now I was running back from the garden actually, I go to the garden and I start growing food, and then I start planning out community events, pretty much just collective work to work the earth, work the land, and also teach other folks how to cultivate their own food resources, and also just be a little bit more aware about how they can contribute to the sustainability of the food system in different aspects, not just like sustainable practices of growing, but also in terms of labor and like community building. So I wear a lot of different hats, and my days vary like that.
Thank you. So what do you all like about your current job or career that you didn't really expect to like? Nadia.
I think I get to design a lot of things from scratch and have it be implemented. So I get to draft and and publish what I write a lot of the time for the sake of the organization. And I think coming into that too is like even in our testing processes. So I'll get to learn a lot about a lot of different types of positions by creating like the oral panel exam for any type of municipal position. And that teaches me a lot, and that helps me write in a lot of different types of disciplines. So I get a lot of exposure, I think, that way, and keeps me really sharp. So
Excellent. Kaylee.
For me, I was a creative writing concentration, as I said, so I was very focused on creative writing in my undergrad experience. So getting a full-time position that was like medical editing and marketing editing, it's a lot more rigid. There's like style guides you have to follow for different brands, and with medical information, there's like the FDA regulations that you have to adhere to and the American Medical Association. So it's a lot more rule-based and there's less creativity, but I kind of like it. In my day-to-day, it's just kind of, it's nice to have a routine, something to reference when you're, stuck on, is this a good edit to suggest? I don't know. You might look in the style guide and see, okay, this is a rule for this brand that maybe I don't need to suggest that, or maybe I do. So it's nice to have things to reference a lot more. Whereas creatively editing, it's kind of more personal judgment. So
Yeah.
that's nice.
Yeah. Vanya, what about you?
One thing for me, probably grant writing. It was something that seemed kind of scary for me at first when I entered the space, because depending on the grants that you're applying to, they could be like one paragraph or like 10 pages of like information and budgeting and all these other different things to put into it. But I think my writing skills really helped and supported me in that sense. And then it was also really cool to see um, just how I could use like my editing skills to actually support that as well. And especially with curriculum building or program building, it's really nice to see that other people trust me as like a communicator, and also trust my point of view on things. Like when we're reading through something or we're looking through something, they're like, oh, I totally missed that. Or like, I didn't even see it from that perspective. And that's really, really important in social justice work, because a lot of these documents or information or things that we're putting out there affects like a larger group than just like, the folks working on it. And initially, like, that was really scary for me, because I would think like, oh, that's going to affect someone else's life, or like that's going to have an impact directly on someone else's life. And that's kind of like a big weight to have. But once you realize that like people trust you and that like you have the knowledge and skills to do that, it's something that you appreciate a lot, because you're like, wow, this is so cool that I got to actually contribute to this either system, resource, or space.
That's great. Thanks. So besides your English major, what other experiences did you have as undergraduates that you think prepare you for what you've done since getting your degree? Nadia.
Something that I was thinking about that I didn't appreciate at the time, but I appreciate now, is that I was also in the business program as a double major, but regardless of that, I had to do like an internship every semester. So, and that was from my freshman year until I graduated. So I got a lot of different experience, and some of those were writing internships. I got to work at the Suicide Prevention Agency, the Jordan Porco Foundation, grant writing, and that qualified under my business degree as well. So I got to kind of dabble in a lot of different areas, and that set me up on the path to build the connections I built in my career now, actually. So that was really wise, I think, back then, even though I dreaded it at the moment. So.
Yeah, I think people kind of do dread putting themselves out there initially for doing that kind of stuff,
It's scary.
Yeah. Kaylee, what about you?
For me, I was a psychology double major up until 2 weeks before graduation, and then I dropped it because it just wasn't going to work out, and I decided I didn't want to come back for another semester, so I turned it into a minor. But for most of my undergraduate career, I was also doing a lot of psychology work, and I was reading a lot of psychology journal articles. So that that different experience of reading things that weren't just literature or creative writing all the time kind of helped me now, where I'm reading a lot of science journal articles and a lot of medical information, so I kind of know what to look for and how to skim it when I need to skim it, and just having that basis has really helped me.
Mhm. Vanya.
For me, when I was at Eastern, I was actually working in the public relations office for a couple semesters, like writing their, just campus letters about like what events were going on and things like that. So I had to go and like interview people or show up to different events that I usually wouldn't go to myself. So that helped me see a lot of different perspectives and also gain a little bit more insight on how people view things and how they value them, which I really appreciated. I also appreciated having to take different classes. Like obviously, science is like not one of my fortes. I don't personally like it a lot, and math and things like that. But meeting the people in those different spaces and seeing how they had different points of views on things, and even just like the way they wrote things differently and how they took them in, I found very valuable in my position now, especially when it comes to having to write materials for other people and thinking about like, how is this going to be perceived? How are people actually going to process this? What are the words that I have to put in there to make it accessible? And like, who is the audience is really what it comes down to. And
Mhm.
how important taking in the audience, the place, the time is for all of these materials is something that I really, really appreciate.
Oh, thank you. So with the exception of changing your majors to something other than English, if you could go back to your time at Eastern, what, if anything, would you do differently to help better prepare you for, your post-graduation job search and your career? Nadia.
I loved my English degree, so I would never want to change my English degree. That's actually what kept me like really sane. I think the whole degree path was having the relief of taking English classes still. But I think I put so much pressure on myself to be successful like immediately after graduation that I tried to do it in a way that sounded like it would matter to everybody around me. And when I finally did it in a way that mattered to me, my path actually opened up a lot more. So I think not always seeking the validation that I think a lot of times comes with school and performance, and getting the grades and achieving at the highest level, I think was something I had to let go of to actually move forward, in my own personal successes.
Mhm. Thanks. Kaylee?
For me, I wish that I put myself out there a little more, and I reached for like internship opportunities a lot earlier than I did, because I didn't realize until really late that that would have looked good on the career path that I wanted to pursue. So I just wish I did that
Mhm.
a lot earlier, but yeah.
So, yeah, this is helpful for us to hear too in the department as we try to prepare students too. Vanya?
I would say that I would have probably just gone and done more things like the opportunities that were in the English department or things that my professor suggested me. Like they were like, you should try to publish that, or you should reach out to this conference, or you should go to this thing that I think is gonna, explore this new, outlet. I wish I would have done way more of that. One, just to expose myself to different things of like writing or different paths of careers. And then two, to just do it. I think it's satisfactory when you look back and you're like, that's so awesome that I got to experience that. I think a lot about the different classes that I was in, and like for example in Dr. Garcia's class, there was Nadia, I think, was in that field trip when we went to um was it Yale one year, right? And we got to present like this presentation on Chicano studies, and I know we were all like kind of a little shaky and scared. We were like, oh, I don't know if this is like going to be interesting for other folks and the synopsis, but the experience was super cool. And I look back at that all the time and I was like, I'm so glad I got to experience that. So even just for like your own sake as a human being, like experiencing those different things, putting yourself out there, I think will be something that you find a lot of joy in later, and you'll be very grateful for, regardless, even if it doesn't align with your career.
Okay, thanks. Great. So this is always kind of a difficult question, I know, but fantasize. What do you see yourself? Where do you see your career path leading you next? Like, what do you imagine yourself doing 5 years from now? Nadia.
Um, it's funny that I ended up in HR because that wasn't the career path I was on when I went for my master's in English. My goal was to to teach at the community college level. That's where I work part-time, and I got really like embedded into the system, and I loved working with community college students. So as I was taking my master's degree path, it was like 3 years. It took me part-time while I was working a career. It's kind of shifted where I ended up a lot. And I think now I still want to be in higher education, but at like the administrative level, the level of dean or something like that, where I could pull in my government knowledge for the CSCU system and kind of keep it going with what I know about higher education, especially as I finish my thesis. So.
Oh, cool. What is your thesis actually? Nadia, it's interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's actually on like diversity, equity, and inclusion in higher ed. It's an ethnography of all the students that I've worked with over the course of 4 years at MCC, and it kind of profiles what unique challenges they've faced that we might have not been aware of. And that's from my perspective as a writing tutor, because often they told me a lot more than they would open up to their teachers. So I got to see like a really intimate view of how inclusion sometimes can fall apart when we're trying to exercise it in the purest form. So I think working with students that up close taught me a lot about what we really need to be doing to serve students.
Excellent. Excellent. Kaylee, what about you? Where do you see yourself going?
I eventually hope to be a fiction editor. That's kind of where I'm aiming. So that's where I hope to be. I've also kind of juggled with the idea of teaching, but I feel like every English major kind of thinks about, should I teach? So either teaching or fiction editing.
Cool. Vanya, what about you?
So I'm actually hoping that in 5 years, I will own some land and have my own farm collective. I'm currently working with a practice group of educators that are focusing on healing and liberation in the classroom specifically in Hartford with a lot of awesome folks. And we're working on some workshops to pretty much focus that in. My take on the classroom is using the outdoor space as growing food, especially with youth, and specifically on intergenerational connections, because I think there's a lot of knowledge that both young people and older folks hold that can really be shared amongst each other to move forward in different causes and spaces. And so that's where I'm hoping to be in about 5 years. I don't know if folks have ever heard of Soulfire Farm in New York. Leah Penniman, you guys can look her up. She has a lot of great books too on liberation, and I think it would be really cool to create that sort of collective and write a couple pieces with local folks here in the movement to share with other folks, because I really want to share all the great tools and things that we have collectively made and created so other folks can apply in different spaces and create just more humane practices in the classroom and different spaces.
So Vanya, for those, just to go back, for those who don't know, what is Soulfire Farm in New York?
The Soulfire Farm in New York is a collective farm that a lot of folks own pretty much together. And it's an educational space centered around healing Black and Brown folks' liberation specifically, and bringing back folks to their original practices in Indigenous culture to heal themselves and heal the land. So it's a really cool initiative. And I would definitely suggest folks to check it out and just even go there for like a Saturday to volunteer or something like that. Like, the feeling you will get just being there is amazing. There's a lot of amazing and great welcoming folks there.
That's great. Thank you. So what advice would you give, and I think a number of people here are in this position, what advice would you give to a current English major who will be graduating soon and doesn't have a clue about what they want to do? How do you start and focus a job search under those circumstances? Nadia, what advice would you give?
That's something like I still struggle with, but I think it's a matter of really like putting yourself out there for a lot of different things and getting rejected as well. In my job search, even in internships, like I've experienced my fair share of rejection, and it kind of drove me to work harder and try to make it more clear what I want to be to myself, and in my personal life too. How do I achieve what I want for my family and myself, and what will get me there based on the skills that I have.
Okay. Thanks. Kaylee?
I think looking inward is really important, like paying attention to what your strengths are and what you feel you would bring out to a job, and then also paying attention to what the jobs are asking for and seeing if those things align. Really trying to picture yourself in a position where you're doing what they're asking for on the job description, and really paying like just question, do I think I can do that every day, 8 hours a day, 5 days a week? Do I really feel like I can do that? And then I think that will help, at least helps me kind of narrow down what positions I'm looking for, what I'm willing to accept from a job, not just thinking about what I can bring to a job, but does it fit with my life, my goals, and my strengths as a person?
Mhm. Right, thanks. Vanya?
Totally resonate with what Kaylee said. Yeah, definitely look at like how much you're going to enjoy things, or if you can see yourself doing that for a couple more years, how long you want to be doing that for. But in addition, I would say network with people who you look up to or who you see have something that you really want to experience or be a part of, and kind of, pick their brain. Most people who really enjoy what they're doing or their career they're in are so happy to talk about it because they're just so like involved in it that they would love to share like the knowledge that they have. So if you see a professor, an educator or something, you're like, that seems like something I want to do, like just ask them like, what's the day to day like? What did you have to do to get there? What are the other resources that are out there for me to get there? Because like probably 9 out of 10 times they're going to have at least one piece of advice that's helpful, like whether it be a website to apply on, to a person or contact to reach out to, or even just one thing that you should start doing now, will be really insightful. So I think that that's something that has helped me in a lot of different places, just asking like, what's the process like? How did you get there? And like, what can I do right now to get there where you are?
Cool. So one last question, and I'm not sure really how to put this, but I'm want to know, like, are there ways that you use or value your English major in ways that aren't related to your work? Because I think some of you, I mean, I think I know that I think you all use writing, for example, in ways that aren't related to your day job. So I think, English majors get out there and they think, oh, I have to do this, I'll do another job and give up everything I loved about being an English major, like writing, for example. So Nadia, are there ways in which do you still write? Do you still read a lot?
Yeah, I've kind of kept into the mix with some of the classes through Workspace in Manchester. It's the art collective. So I'll do like a fiction class or a memoir class with some of my friends, and we keep on top of it that way. Or
Okay.
I'll write poetry in my spare time. But I think even just through the English major itself, through writing essays and stuff, it helped me understand myself, to see myself in writing. So I think it all started with the pieces that I wrote for school actually helped me become more comfortable hearing myself on paper as well.
Oh, good. Thanks. Kaylee, what about you?
For me, everyone in my life comes to me for writing help, everyone I know. So I'm always writing. I'm always thinking about writing because my mom is coming to me like, can you help me write this email or something? So I'm constantly writing.
Excellent. Vanya?
So outside of work, I'm involved in a lot of different organizations. It's just kind of like usually they come to me like, hey, can you write this? Can you do this? Can you do this write up? Or can you edit this for us? Or we did this workshop, or we did this cool thing. Can you look at it over and like tell us if we're missing something? So that's kind of where I use it outside. But for my own personal use, like Nadia said, I use it a lot for introspection and just looking back over through the years, even with like the pieces that I wrote when I was in college and what that said about me at the time, and then comparing them to now. I think something like writing is just so cathartic, and I'm sure like a lot of the English majors can agree that putting down your thoughts and ideas on paper just solidifies it or puts it really into perspective. And yeah, so that's my take on using it for like healing pretty much.
Cool, thank you. So those are all the questions that I have. So I'm going to open the floor now to the students and the faculty who are here to ask you their own questions about yourselves and your lives and your careers. Barb, Dr. Liu.
So all three of you talked about experiences you had with internships at one point or another, either while a student or after graduating. And so I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that process of finding, applying for, and getting internships, and what advice might you give to, some of our majors now who are thinking about looking for internships?
Nadia, do you want to start?
Yeah, I think the way I went about it was not based actually on the skills I had, but what I thought was interesting. Like I said, my most impactful internship was the energy office, helping to launch Sustainable CT. And I got to use my writing skills there. So I was able to be involved in something and always hear about something that I was really held really close to my own heart while still having a way to participate in it. And I think kind of knowing where to set your compass is really helpful. Where do you want to be around?
Did you use like the Office of Career Services for that? Did you go through professors?
Yeah, I was always in career services. And my LinkedIn was heavy too. So that was something that I was constantly working on. But even outside of career services, just looking up on my own research, what I'm interested in too.
Kaylee?
Yeah, LinkedIn is definitely my biggest source of employment traffic, and it's kind of the same process applying to internships on there as it is to apply to jobs. So I just made sure my resume was really as tight as possible, which I was constantly working on at Eastern. I think I even went to a resume event, like having somebody in the professional space review your resumes. I think in Eastern Career Services held that at some point. So I went to one of those to have them review my resume to give me some feedback on it and what I could fix. So by the time that I was sending it out, I felt like, okay, it's as good as possible. And I just hoped somebody would respond. And eventually some people did. So.
Vanya?
Yeah, I agree. Same. LinkedIn, looking online, check the school website constantly, check the English board constantly, just, as you're walking down the hallway, check different departments. But in addition, also keep tabs on what you're doing. I feel like when I was in college, I was doing so many cool things and I just forgot, like when it came down to writing a resume or something like that, it like went blank in my head. Like I did like so many cool like conferences or other things with professors. And then when it came down to writing it, I was like, what do I, So keep like a notebook or something when you do something that you felt was like really cool or impactful, and just write those things down so you can reference them when you're, actually making a resume or applying to things. And then another thing that I find really powerful is naming what you want to do. So like when you meet people or when you're connecting with people, just like throw in where you're hoping to go. Because again, people will keep in mind like, oh, I remember like Kaylee or Nadia really want to do this thing. And like, there's this opportunity. Let me make sure I can like, share that with them. So definitely share where you're hoping to go. I think that's really powerful because then it solidifies it one for you so you can keep it in your head, but then it also solidifies it for other people so they can keep you in mind for opportunities.
Thanks.
Yeah. Dr. Garcia.
Hi, I have a comment and a question. My comment is, I think Kaylee is the only English major I have ever heard say she likes to use reference manuals. You enjoy that? You like going to the APA and like cross-checking? That's
Yeah, I do. It's kind of like mind numbing. So it's just autopilot. So when I do it for 8 hours a day, it kind of is like, okay, it's nice that I can kind of turn my brain off and look at something and say, oh, the rule is there. I don't have to think about it.
That's really interesting because all of y'all's jobs are very creative. Y'all have a lot of creative license to just sort of do what you want to do, which leads to my question. Y'all have a lot of authority. People trust you in your jobs. So I'm wondering how the English major prepared you to, and it sounds like y'all are very successful in those leadership positions. So that's my question. How'd the English major prepare you to be making executive decisions?
Nadia?
I think it really made me like trust myself first in writing. And what I mean by that is like to be the most honest that I ever could be, even in my papers. Both of you have read things from me over the years too, and in those papers is where I really came to understand myself, and I think being really raw helped me to become a humble leader, to know how I got there and to know what it took to try to understand myself internally. Helped me understand other people, I think. Yeah.
Cool. Kaylee, what about you?
Once I figured out that I wanted to pursue editing, I decided to take a lot of workshops, as many as I could, because there was a lot of peer editing involved in workshops and peer review, and we read each other's stories all the time. So that experience is always what I pull on when I'm editing now and when I'm managing other editors and I'm, telling them what I think that they would benefit their writing. I pull on my experiences from workshops because I learned a lot about what good feedback is depending on the style of writing that a person is trying to achieve or that the assignment wants them to achieve. So that really helped me a lot now. And I always think about it, what I learned when I was learning how to be a good peer editor for editing now.
Cool. Vanya?
Yeah, I think that peer editing space was super crucial to just working with other people. I realized that a lot of folks don't usually get to share spaces where they get to give feedback to each other in such like an honest way. So that creates a lot of like just disconnect between, employees and things like that. So when it comes to like co-creating or like working with each other, a lot of folks aren't really equipped to give like effective and helpful feedback. Sometimes it can come off as like attacks or things like that, and that's something that I get constant like praise for all the time. People are super grateful for the way I can frame things for them, so it doesn't sound like I'm attacking them or anything like that, because that's not really what it is. And also the way I was able to learn those skills in writing and be like kind of critical and seeing different things that folks might not see, is something that people really appreciate, like that different point of view or taking into account the different things. I think a lot about how I was exposed to so many different types of writers and how their background affected their writing, and how we were encouraged into look into that like under a microscope, like look into how authors, why they wrote things in a certain way, how their identities must have affected their writing, like publishers even, and things like that. Those different layers that we were encouraged to peel back transfers so well into other different spaces. And I think it really comes down to what Nadia and Kayla were speaking to, like that honesty and being able to be your authentic self and using that authentic voice. I think people really see that and appreciate it a lot, because they don't get to interact with folks who have those skills to, one, like be honest, but also like be humane in the feedback process, in that way.
Great. Excellent. Does anybody have any other questions? Anything from the students who are here? No. Well, is there anything final the three of you, any of you would like to say to, or would like the students here to know before we sign off?
I would love to offer internships. And if anybody is interested, or even working positions, we're expanding in our staff this summer. If any folks have experience in youth facilitation, youth curriculum, or even want to learn how to just grow their own food and they're going to be around in Willimantic, you are definitely welcome to reach out to me and get involved. We're always looking to build more community and build more folks, or even if you just want to see what we're doing and test it out as an experience, we are totally open to that. So I definitely want to put out the opportunity for y'all.
And if you are interested in that, you can contact me and I can give you Vanya's contact information. That's great. Yeah, Dean Todd.
Thank you for letting me jump in here. I just wanted to underscore that that really beautiful advice of make sure you kind of talk about what you're interested in to as many different people. I still have found that really valuable in the way that I connect with people in my field, just to know what they're interested in, what they're working on, who I personally can go out and seek as a mentor. And so to see that mentorship as something that can happen throughout your whole life, and you get to choose, right, as you're in your work, who's going to be a valuable mentor for you. And one of the ways you get to do that is by finding out what they do and making sure that you say what you do. And I just, all three of you were so fabulous. So thank you. You're wise and impressive and so thoughtful. So thank you.
And I think too that the other thing about networking and being in touch with people and letting them know what you're interested in is people also see things in you that you didn't know you had. I think you'd be good at this. Why don't you try this out? And sometimes it meshes with what you think about yourself too. Any other advice to share?
Just to piggyback off of that, the imposter syndrome never stops. So don't let it hold you back. You're always going to feel to some extent like you're not measuring up when you probably are, and you're probably excelling at that. So
thanks for
reach
saying
for
that.
things.
Thanks for saying that. I still have imposter syndrome. So
don't let it hold you back. Apply to things. If you get rejected, keep going, because somebody's going to see what you have to offer.
I have a question.
Yes.
When it comes to entry-level positions, how long did you three have to stay in there for until you, let's say, level up or I guess improve to the next position?
Anyone can take that question.
I can speak to that too.
Okay.
In like every field, they usually recommend like 3 to 5 years, but our society's changing and people switch jobs a lot sooner than that, and there's nothing wrong with that actually. So I think as long as you're there long enough to gain the experience and display that experience, that matters more in the market now. So anywhere from a year to 3 years, I say, is a sweet spot. I did 3 years before I leveled up. So
the rest of you agreed. Vanya, you're nodding.
Yeah, my situation's a little odd because so we're mostly like grant funded. So I get to do a lot of different things, and like I pretty much get to decide what my title is, which is kind of cool. And we're like restructuring, but I would say about a year or so is what it took me to like get everything that I thought I needed to move up and to really earn people's trust. Because it's not necessarily all the time even about skills. It's more about how consistently you show up and how much effort you put into things. Because I have worked with a lot of people who I think have a lot of great potential, but the consistency doesn't match up. And a lot of times we have given positions to other folks over just that consistency, because it's really valued to know that you can rely on people like that. So I genuinely believe that like you being able to follow up with emails on a timely order, you being able to like follow through with your commitments that you said you would do, and even just holding yourself accountable. Like if you do that all in the first year, people will also try to make space for you. Like if people really value you, they're going to try to go out of their way to find more funds for you to stay around or to push you up into a different position and things like that. But I would say about a year is what it takes to pretty much like, I would say, prove yourself, right? And like really show people that like you're ready to move up into that other space, because people aren't going to give you the space to level up or move up if they don't have that trust in you.
Kaylee, you're nodding too. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think in my field, it's a little more 2 years to level up, but after about a year, they start to like, they already put it in their timeline when they're going to promote you. So it's around a year to 2 years.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, thanks for the question. I think it's 5:55, and I think people have other places they have to be. So I think we'll end on that note. Thank you all. Thank you very much to the alumni for presenting to us. It was really great to see you all too. Miss having you around. And yeah, thanks again. Thanks to you all for coming. And hopefully we'll get this up online and it'll all be cool. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Oh,
Thank you for having me.
thank you. Bye-bye.
Everyone, thank you for coming to talk. Y'all were so great.
Yeah, it's great to see
Yeah.
you all. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. My class really enjoyed it.
Oh, good.
Thank
Good.
you.
Thanks for bringing your class.
Absolutely. Take care. And yeah, thank all the 3 alumni. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. This was great. Thank you so
Okay.
much. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.